Hello, John.
Hey there. Let me
Hey.
see. Hold on a sec. There we are.
Oh,
Hey.
cool.
Hi. I didn't set up any lights or anything. Sorry.
Oh,
Oh,
that's fine.
it's quite all right.
We just
Oh,
appreciate you coming on with us today. So,
Oh, my pleasure.
oh
yeah.
yeah.
I took a look at the website and some of the episodes you guys have done. You got some good guests on there, so I'm happy to be included.
Cool.
Cool.
Yeah. No,
Thank you.
we appreciate you responding and being willing to come on with us. So it should be fun. We're excited about it. So.
Yes.
Ah, well, good. Well, me too.
um, so I was thinking I'd do just like a quick little intro, just to kind of set the stage for us, and then just kind of go back and forth, and we have a series of questions for you and stuff, and hopefully have some fun along the way. So,
All right. Good.
All right, cool.
Cool.
Oh, and before we start, as far as timing, we want to be respectful to your time. So is there a certain amount of time you want to try to keep us to? I mean, we don't want to go on for
Let's see. It's 9:30. I have to eat dinner at 5:30, so I have 8 hours.
All right. Sounds good. All right, awesome. So, all right. Welcome to this very special episode of Latch-Key Dads. Greg and I are very excited to talk with our guest today. He has performed in 12 countries. He's performed on The Tonight Show, Rockin' New Year's Eve, Nickelodeon, The Simpsons, and The Late Show with Jimmy Fallon, to name a few. He has performed on 31 gold, platinum, and double platinum albums with 5 gold and platinum singles and 3 Grammy Awards. We could go on and on, but without further ado, we welcome John Bermuda Schwartz, longtime friend and drummer for none other than Weird Al Yankovic. Thanks for joining us today, John.
Oh, thank you. Very good to be here.
Yeah. So you've archived an incredible collection of photos and memorabilia over the years, and you just released your second book, Lights, Camera, Accordion, Eye-Popping Photographs of Weird Al Yankovic, 1981 to 2006. That's a mouthful. Tell us about the process of sifting through all those amazing pieces of history and photographs.
Wow. Well, it's fortunately the publisher and editors of the book were able to go through and sort out photos. I mean, I narrowed down several thousand photos to about 850, and I couldn't get past that. I thought they were all great, and we just couldn't do a book that big.
Sure.
And I ran them by all the guys in the band. I ran them by Al. I said, please, if there's anything in here you don't like, I mean, help me out. I need to get the number down. Anything you can do. And I think I was able to shave about 5 photos off the whole thing. So they were of no help at all. They liked them all too. But the editors of the book, Shane and Desiree Lewis, who are Al fans as well, had a bit of a different eye on the photos than obviously I could. And they were able to get them down to about 301 photos, I think, are in all the chapters. And I could not have done that. And they made really good choices. I mean, there was almost nothing that I thought should have been in there that didn't make it. I mean, all the photos really deserve to be there. And I'm very happy that they could do that, because I couldn't do it. It's, I mean, too subjective for me.
Yeah. And going through it, I mean, the photos that are in there, they're so fun. And I mean, obviously for us to be able to kind of be on the journey to some level and see all that history is really fun. So.
Well, thanks. Well, again, the editors did a good job. They put the stuff out there that they knew the fans would like. And they chose wisely, so I'm very happy with that.
Yeah, definitely.
John, if I may, I would just like to say that I'm really a big fan of you and the band and Weird Al ever since I was 10 years old.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Weird Al was a big, fantastic part of my childhood, and growing up, it was great knowing that it was okay to be weird. So that was really cool.
Yeah.
It's not only okay; it's very profitable as well.
Apparently, eh?
Yeah.
So with the book that your new book, Lights, Camera, Accordion, it's really cool. Looking through all those great pictures made me feel like I was reliving parts of my youth all over again. And when you have a subject as iconic as Weird Al, it's great to see a retrospect of all of those cool and crazy things you guys did together. Was there any specific pictures that maybe you'd forgotten about, and then when you came across them, like made you pause and smile?
Well, there were several like that. I generally, when I had the photos developed, I almost always got 2 sets of prints. I kept one, so that was the archive, and then whoever was in the other prints, I would give them copies. But that wasn't really the rule. I mean, there were evidently a lot of those that I had either given away the only copy or given away both copies. And so I saw, as I was scanning all of these and reliving, my youth and my times with Al and all that, I was seeing a lot of photos that I didn't remember and that I know I don't have copies of. And it's like, that's a good photo. It's like, I understand why I must have given it away.
Yeah.
It was too good for me to keep. I don't know how many of those made it in the book. I mean, again, all of the photos in the book are special, and it was cool to relive my, a lot of my life. I mean, my photo archiving started, scanning stuff from the early '70s, so it wasn't just Al. It was, everything in my life. But 25 years of that on film was Al as well, and that was the impetus for this book. I hadn't really considered a second book. But when I saw all these photos, I thought, there's a bunch of good color photos, even the ones that have been seen online, or some of them have been published before. Those were all taken from prints that I had scanned and retouched as best I could, but they were no better than the 4x6 prints that I had. And when I was seeing the scans from the negatives and how clean they were and the dynamic in them and how crisp they were, it was like, no, these are much better. These, anything they've seen before needs to be seen again, and a lot more. So there are some photos that are recognizable in there. It's like, I think I've seen that before. If it was online, unfortunately, they were seeing it probably in a very low res, crunchy state, because I started putting up photos back in '95 of Al and stuff. And with the screen resolutions in the day, 640 by 480, 800 by 600, if you had a nice screen, you had if you filled up the screen with a photo by today's standards, it's pretty small.
Yeah.
And with dial-up speeds, I had to really crunch them. And so I wasn't that concerned about quality as much as just getting the photo out there. So any photos that they've seen before are either somewhat to vastly inferior to what's in the book. And I realized, I thought it's nice to put these out again, like remastering an old album and really improving it, as the Beatles have done many times. I think that's what's happened with these photos, and the reaction to the book has been really good, and I'm very happy about that.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Kind of jumping into your process of being a drummer, playing drums on a Weird Al album must be like playing with a dozen different bands, all in one album. Did you ever have the opportunity to collaborate with any of the drummers, or did you just have to figure out how to replicate that music and all the percussion elements on your own?
I've met a number of the drummers who I've imitated. I don't think I ever chatted with them up front about any hints or tips they could give me. I was just kind of on my own. We were all on our own to listen carefully and replicate as carefully as our ability, and later with a lot of dance and rap music as as the technology allowed us to. And we learned a lot. I grew a lot as a player. I grew a lot as a programmer and a sound designer for all of the drum and percussion sounds that I had to face later. I mean, there's not some magical producer somewhere that, did all that stuff for us. We were on our own, and we all learned and grew, and it was a great process. I'm way ahead of where I would have been without Al. So, I'm very happy for all of that.
Sure. And just as a quick follow-up, you guys started obviously before the internet was really even available to the public. Obviously that's changed over the course of the many years you've been performing. Has that sort of changed your process at all with the access to, information immediately? Has that played into it at all, or no?
Not as much. I mean, really, as far as doing the songs, it's just a listen. You listen carefully, and that's the first step. And there's really, that's about all you can do. I mean, I really had nowhere to go to ask anybody. Even with the internet, it was really, it's a great knowledge base, and it's a ton of information, but nobody was doing the things that I was doing. Nobody that I had access to anyway. I really couldn't ask anyone, how was this done, or what do you think this is? I just had to think of it myself, and I wasn't able to know what was done, so I had to listen carefully and think, well, what would I do? What are the elements of that sound? What would I do to replicate it, as closely as possible? How much of that is just studio magic? How much of it is EQ or processing that I'm really not set up to do, here at home? Although a lot of that I did figure out later on. Actually, I think eventually a lot of sounds and stuff became available online. a lot of different remixes of the songs. Some of
Mhm.
these songs became available online, and I was able to go in and listen more carefully, in some cases actually sample some of the sounds if they were in the clear, and
Mhm.
was able to, get pretty close. But 90% of the time, honestly, I had to do this stuff all myself, and the internet was, in that respect, was of little help.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. I mean, the way you guys have been able to replicate the sounds and the score, behind the song. It's really amazing and
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
fantastic. Yeah.
Really cool. Speaking of like the band, it's amazing that the band has been together for I think 40 years. I can't think of any rock band that's been together that long. Is there some secret? How do you
There,
guys do
there
it?
is another rock band. There's U2 has been together with the
Oh, okay.
same members, uh, slightly longer than we have, I think. No, you know what? And until recently, I guess Rush would have counted,
Yep. Yeah.
although Neil Peart was not the original drummer, but close enough. Uh, and again until recently ZZ Top, but with the loss of was it Dusty Hill? I forgot who
Yes.
passed
Yeah.
away. Yeah.
Yeah.
With his loss. Now that hasn't stopped them from going back out and playing, but with the original members, yeah, we're one of just a handful. Literally U2 is the only other band that
Yeah.
hasn't had any member changes and is still active. And I think their last album may have also been a #1 album. I'm not sure. So, we're in good company, or they're in
Yeah.
good company, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of that, I mean, the great musicians and celebrities that you guys have come in contact with over the years, was there ever a moment where you kind of caught yourself and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm talking with, John Bermuda Schwartz right now, that's really cool. What did you ever have any of those moments yourself?
I probably, I mean, we've run into, thanks to Al, who will have, different friends of his, well-known celebrities, other people in, and not just in music.
Mhm.
They'll be backstage at the shows in some of the bigger cities, and it was cool to, say hello to Lin-Manuel Miranda, for example,
Sure. Yeah.
to Alice Cooper.
Mhm.
It was, there've been a few.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I've met a couple of my drumming heroes, not always through Al, but
Mhm.
I've got to meet a number of drummers that I probably wouldn't have met if I was not Bermuda. I've just if I
Sure.
was just some other fanboy,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have maybe met Hal Blaine, for
Mhm.
example.
Yeah.
So it's been pretty cool. I mean, it's there's a bit of celebrity that goes along with working for a celebrity, and that's
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. And, for you, I know I've heard that Hal is one of your, sort of heroes in the world as well as Ringo. And for you to be able to meet Hal, that's really awesome.
Well, it was, I not only met him, and I met him through a friend of mine who was working for a drumstick company that both Hal and I endorsed, and she introduced us. And this was back in 91 or 92 or something like that. And Hal and I don't want to say we became close friends, but we did become friends. Uh, I think he was that way with everyone. I think everyone he knew, who was around him, you felt like he thought you were a close friend of his. I mean, he made you feel like a close friend.
Yeah.
I'd been to his house before. My wife and I had gone and had lunch with him before. We've taken him out to lunch. When my father passed away, he called the house and offered his condolences. He wrote me several personal notes and sent them. He always sent me a birthday card,
Yeah.
and he always sent it or eventually a birthday email, and it was always a day early. And I didn't, because he really thought he had the date wrong, and I just didn't have the heart to tell him he had it wrong. He thought it was August 17th and it was August 18th. And this went on for years, and I just didn't have the heart to tell him, because he was just so nice to remember or check his date book or whatever it was, that I thought, I don't want to be ungrateful. That was very, very cool.
Yeah.
And
That's fantastic.
it was a pleasure to know him and to be able to chat with him and to be able to see him now and then. And I was at my wife and I were specifically invited to his 90th birthday party in 2019, and it was about a month before he passed. And it was very cool to see him there. There were some other, there were a number of people from the industry that I had run into there before. Charlie Watts from the Stones was there. Jim
Oh my
Keltner was
gosh.
there.
Yeah.
I didn't get to say, they were on their way out as we were coming in, but the place was packed. It was at the Baked Potato, a famous jazz club in LA.
Yeah.
And it was just packed. And we took off. It was noisy and it was crowded. And we got a chance to say hi to Al and wish him happy birthday. And then, we took off, but they got Hal up on the drums after that.
Yeah.
Hal was moving pretty slow at this time. Well, it was his 90th birthday.
Sure. Yeah.
And he was moving pretty slow, but there are some YouTube videos of him doing, playing, I think probably These Boots Are Made for Walking.
Okay.
And they might have made him play Be My Baby, with the famous drum intro. I'm not sure. There were a couple of songs, and he sounded pretty good. He sounded pretty good for an old man who was moving slowly. He did all right.
Yeah.
I dare say I couldn't have played the stuff any better. It was very cool to have seen him, and it was, very unfortunate. Literally a month later, he passed, and it was a very sad day.
Yeah, definitely.
I was just before the pandemic, I did get to go see Nick Mason of Pink Floyd. He came around with a saucer full of secrets, and he was in his 70s, and he sounded, just like the album. So he was going strong at 70 something, which is pretty cool.
Well, we may have that chance. We're all in our 60s. Actually, our bass player has crossed over. Not that way. No, he crossed over 70.
Yeah.
He'll be, when we go back out in February and March, he will have just turned 72.
Wow.
Okay.
But you know what? As you approach that age, and as you get into your 60s, it's like you're not old. I mean, things happen, but you're not so old that you forget or can't play again, unless you have some physical thing going on. I feel, I'm 66, and I feel, and I hope I play like I did when I was 26. I think I play better, but I mean, I certainly don't play worse. I feel exactly the same. I'm not any more tired or worn out or anything at the end of a night. It's and I'm not in necessarily great shape. I just, the idea, when I was maybe in my 20s or 30s, that I might still be playing drums in my 60s, probably, seemed very far-fetched. And now it's like, no, it's no different. I'm on Medicare now, so if anything happens, I'm good. And that's about it. But, age is not, some people get old, in their 50s, and some people keep going into their 80s, or into their 90s. I mean, you got Tony Bennett, who is only just finally showing signs of, kind of not being able to keep up her performance. I mean, at 94 or 95 or whatever he is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it speaks to passion. When you're passionate about something, age, it just doesn't matter, And,
well, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think age is again, barring any physical disabilities or issues, age is just a state of mind, and you can get old very quickly, or you can stay young forever. It's just, and I think it's kind of up to the individual. It's a very subjective choice, and I think I still think I'm in my 20s, in terms of the way I approach things.
Likewise.
I've just done a lot more, and I've got a lot more experience. But I mean, as far as my approach and attitude, I still feel young.
Yeah, cool.
So my son is 14 years old, William, and he plays the drums. Would you have any advice for such a young drummer to what could they do to get better? Or
listen to things, listen to what other drummers are doing. Now granted, on a lot of today's music, a lot of the drum parts are programmed, but there's a ton of stuff where there are live players and, doing some cutting edge stuff and doing some simple stuff. I mean, give him a chance to listen to, the rock era is pretty lengthy. I mean, we're coming up on, 65 years of rock music that has not changed a whole lot. I mean, some of the technology has changed, and, but, as far as the drummer, a lot of the stuff is the same. A lot of today's songs have the same parts that were going on in the 60s, some very basic rock parts. And that's what the drums basically do. So have him listen to those kind of have him listen to Ringo, have him listen to Fleetwood Mac, have him listen to, some some Genesis, I mean, just have him listen to a bunch of different stuff. Some Frank Zappa maybe, and let him hear a lot of different styles of drumming, a lot of different techniques, a lot of different, some things are very simple, some things are complicated, and they all have a place. You can tell him, and he won't believe it for a long time, but you can tell him that 9 out of 10 times playing the simpler stuff is where you make the money. if that's a concern, or if if it's a concern about, and not just make the money, but as far as the amount of groups that out, 9 out of 10 drummers out there are playing kind of straight ahead stuff. And that's the stuff that people were playing 40, 50, 60 years ago, and it still holds up. Now the sounds are a little bit different sometimes, but that's not always the drummer's job. That's somebody who's put the mic on the drum and goes back into a control room or out to the front of house and tweaks it. That's their job, to control some of the sounds. But as far as the parts, 9 out of 10 times, very, very straight ahead stuff. But it's also good to know more. It's good to know a lot more than you do. So have him learn it all, and have him get together with friends of his that are learning guitars, piano, bass, horn players, maybe. Jazz is good. Jazz and swing, kind of stuff. Old, if there's some old Dixieland charts you can get, have him play some Beatles songs, have him play some Stones, introduce him to Led Zeppelin. There's just Keith Moon with the Who. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, but again, you would never do those kind of parts with anyone but the Who. But yeah, just have him listen to a lot of stuff, and try different things, and he'll find certain things he likes. He may just like playing straight ahead stuff, like I like playing straight ahead stuff, and those are the kind of gigs I do, and I've been lucky to have it turn into a career.
Very cool. Thank you.
And speaking to that, as far as the process of just for you to drum on out whether it be at a gig or out on tour, was there any time where something extremely unexpected happened, where you'd put it in the category of a weird situation that either something technically went wrong, or something like that?
Not with me so much as with our well, first off, Al has walked off the front of the stage a few times, and I should remind people that that's anywhere from like 4 to 6 feet to where the audience sits.
Sure.
And he just, with the lights in his eyes, he just didn't know where the front of the stage, and wearing his accordion. There were 2 occasions where that happened, and and he's in good shape. I mean, a fall like that, I remember sometime back in the 90s, or he had taken a spill. We were playing up north in California, and it was an outdoor stage, and he had taken, was during our medley of songs, and he had the accordion on and was doing something, and all of a sudden it stopped, and we heard this kind of accordion groan, and we looked over, and Al was gone, and he had fallen off the front of the stage. And I think somebody, when it was, as our guys were going down to get him, I think I heard something like drum solo, to take a little time. Anyway, he came back and finished the show. He was moving a little slow, and went to the hospital, and they looked at his leg, and he'd sprained his thigh or his leg or something. But any of the rest of us, we would have broken a leg or an arm or a rib or something like that. And but and on the technology side, for many years we've been using video and audio tracks keyed off the video, to bring in certain horn parts, or maybe certain female vocals, things percussion parts, things that as a 4-piece band plus Al up front we just can't do, and at the risk of not playing the song, sort of playing a bar band version of a song. We want to do, people pay good money to come in. We want to make it sound, full, not always just like the record, but we want to try. And so we have different video things, different eventually we got into like computer servers for both the audio and video. And I remember specifically back in 2003, we had a server that was constantly breaking down and constantly just like freezing, like crashing, I guess. Yeah. And we and sometimes we could get, depending on what the song was, sometimes we would get through and we'd finish the song, and it would just, the audio and the video would somehow just go away, but we would keep playing and it would be okay. But there were some songs that very heavily depended on that, and it would stop and we would just be hung out to dry on stage. And this happened many, 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 many times. And until we eventually replaced the server and continued to replace servers until we got, more capable gear. But there was a period, and it was back in 2003, and that server would crash almost every night, at least once during the show. So we had to have these contingency plans about, well, when the server crashes, and of course it's going to, we just don't know when, because it'll be a different song each time. If it crashes at a time when we're backstage and the video's running while we're doing a costume change and the audience is watching the video and it just stops, you got dead air. Well, if we're all backstage, whoever is the first to be changed into their to their costume or clothes or whatever would go out, and they would do a specific shtick to buy some time while they rebooted the server. My shtick was to go out and there's this kind of old children's poem from Europe called the Tale of Little Suck-a-Thumb, and it was a story about, and it's something that I learned when I was like 13, and it's just, Al can call it, and I could just recite it off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And so that was my bit. If only Al was doing the costume change and it was between songs, the video was running, and we were all just on stage just waiting for him to come out, and the video went down, we would go into a specific song. We would go into Wipeout, for example, and we would play it like in different keys. Everyone would be in another key, and we would just do like a standard arrangement so that the server could be rebooted and the audience was entertained. If we were all on stage doing a song and it crashed in the middle of a song, and again, depending on which song, then we would at that point go into Radio by Elvis Costello. And there's kind of a story behind that when Elvis appeared on Saturday Night Live and was going to do Radio, which is a slam at the broadcast industry. And the producer said, we don't want you to do that song. And Elvis said, oh, all right. And they came out and they started to do this other song. I forgot what it was. And Elvis says, wait a minute, stop. There's no reason to do this song here. Radio. And they went into Radio, much to the consternation of the producers, and they were not on the show again for another 20 years. Anyway, so that's our bit. The server would go down, we sort of just like kind of stop, and Al would go, wait, there's no reason to do this song here. Radio. And he would go into that. So we not only were kind of under the gun the whole night wondering when it was going to happen, but we had to remember what to do. And so that was a constant problem. That happened literally every night during the 2003 tour until we replaced that server. We went through several more iterations of servers until eventually, a few years ago, we switched to Mac Pros, and those worked very well. We had like a redundant system, and those worked very well, and which we continue to use now, I think. I mean, I'm not on that end of the things, but I mean, I know when that happened, and that we rarely have a problem. I mean, it's extremely rare, which is great for our comfort level on stage, because we're not kind of just wondering when the boom is going to come down. We can actually play and enjoy what we're doing without wondering about when we're going to have to bail.
Yeah. The fire drill aspect is never fun. So.
Yeah. So it's been a long time since anything horrible happened, but there have been a couple. So again, not me. I mean, I don't even know if I've even broken a snare head or anything, where I had to everything has just changed, until I can get another snare up there. Almost no problems for me. So, fingers crossed.
Actually, you mentioned something, snare drum. I had heard some interesting stats about the number of drums that you have. And at the time, I think you had 111 snare drums. Has that number changed at all? Or are you still in that same world of 111?
It's either 110 or 111. Wow. I don't. It seems like I sold a snare, although I can't imagine why. So it's either. I think 111 sounds right.
Yeah.
That's. But honestly, there's only about 5 of them that I use, and most of the time there's only 2 or 3. So. Truth be told, there's some collectible snares in there, but as far as what I use, I could certainly offload, 98% of them. And someday, at some point, I will.
So, John, if you were going to go on a long road trip with no internet access, but you had a CD player, what are some of the CDs you would bring with you?
Oh, boy. Well, if no internet, no, I wouldn't go. I would stay home. No, so my desert island discs is what
Pretty much.
they used to call it. The kids call it.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. I still like all of the old groups I grew up with. I mean, I don't listen to the Beatles every day anymore, but I certainly have a complete Beatles collection, all the reissued, remastered stuff, 150 bootleg CDs, all of the solo stuff by all of the guys. A lot of that Zappa I would take. There's the Monkees I love, Turtles, Rolling Stones. It took a while. At the time I wasn't really into them, but eventually I learned to like Led Zeppelin a lot. I like a lot of different stuff. I have to look at my CD collection here. It starts roughly with ABBA, and it goes ABBA to Zappa, and Elvis. Big fan of Elvis Costello, Devo. So again, a lot of 60s, 70s, 80s stuff.
Okay.
But I like Nirvana as well. I mean, I would have liked them even if we hadn't done one of their songs and then done an original based on their songs. I like a lot of almost anything Motown. So again, 60s and some 70s stuff. But really mostly older stuff. It would be hard pressed to get me to bring anything much past about 2000. and as the decades go on from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, it diminishes a little bit. Very heavy on the 60s, pretty heavy on the 70s, a little less of the now I was a big fan of new wave stuff and some of the rock coming out in the 80s, but by the 90s I'd kind of lost track of a lot of the bands and the musical styles, and past 2000 not a whole lot.
I know that you had mentioned just now Led Zeppelin, and I know they're very tight on what people can use. They don't allow much commercialization, but they did let you use a song in Trapped in the Drive-Thru, which is pretty cool, right? The
yeah. Well, thank you very much. You know that we recorded that.
Yes.
That's not.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. That's not a sample. Although people have accused us of oh, that's great, they let you use a sample. And it's like, no, they didn't. But there's a and if you A-B'd them, they're not quite. It's not quite. John Bonham had a certain feel. There was a certain lilt to the way he played, and that's hard to do. You can play the parts, but it doesn't ever quite feel like Bonham. It doesn't ever quite feel like Ringo. It's just they had a certain feel that they did, and that's what made them who they are and what made them valuable to those bands. Why someone else just can't come in and do those things and have it be quite the same. But there's more information behind us using that clip and recording that. That was I think that was Al's original choice. Now that doesn't mean anything till I tell you the rest.
Okay.
And he had not heard back from the Led Zeppelin people, and he thought, we better explore something else. We'll how about AC/DC, like Back in Black? It had to be about 11 or 13-second instrumental piece that was highly recognizable, and so there's that, and they got back pretty quick and said no, and Al thought, well, there's one, I got one last thing in my pocket. We can always do My Sharona, and because I know that we can do that because we've done it. So we know we can do that. And that's recognizable, and we'll go in, we'll record that, and we did. So I have a recording of us doing the opening for My Sharona. Literally the week we were in the studio, Led Zeppelin's people got back and said, okay, yeah, you can go ahead and use the bit from Black Dog. And so we had this other thing in the can already, but that was what Al wanted. And so we recorded that. And so I have a mixed recording of us doing the opening for My Sharona. And that sounds like the Knack. It really does sound like the Knack. Led Zeppelin's a little harder to get, but in context, it sounded great.
Oh yeah.
And more than a few people have said, oh, you just, that was cool of them to let you use a sample of their song. It's like, well, it was cool for them to, let us, use it for a percentage, and we recorded it, and that is our recording of that. So I that was cool. Yeah, and when we would do the song live, we would do. I don't know if we did the whole. It was like an 11-minute piece or something.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't remember if we did the entire 11 minutes, but whatever it was we did, there wasn't a whole lot of live playing because almost all of it was on a track, and there was a video. I think there might have been a video running, and Al was singing, except when it came to the Led Zeppelin part, and we would come in and we would play it,
Rock,
and then we would have to get out of it, and then in the meantime the track is still running because it has to come back in, and so that's my job, to make sure the timing was right and that we started and ended in the right place. And, it took a couple of times to get through it and get the feel of it, but after that it was really seamless. It was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun to do that.
It's a great song. It really, I love that one.
Oh, thanks.
So I was reading in your bio that for a majority of the time that you were out touring and recording new music, you were also working at Westwood One. So I'm just curious, like the balance between both those worlds. And then I think in '96 is when you transitioned to doing web design, which I'm also interested in because I'm a web designer as well. So you can just talk a little bit about that process of balancing or wearing multiple hats.
Well, luckily one never really interfered with the other. They were extremely tolerant and extremely giving in that they would let me come and go on tour. It was, I always had to make sure my job was covered. I always had, depending on what job I did. I mean, I had actually quit the company at one point for a tour, and they called me back and said, can you come back? And we want you to do this job. And then you'll have an assistant, and so all of a sudden, I was getting promoted while I was on the road, while I wasn't even working. And in balancing, it wasn't hard to balance it for me. I was able to do, I wasn't thinking about Westwood One while I was on the road. I wasn't thinking about, drumming while I was at Westwood One. I treated each of them, I gave each of them 100% while I was there. Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, I would go out on the road and I'd have a pager, when we had pagers back in the day, and I wasn't on salary while I was on the road. I mean, it was leave of absence or, whatever. And I would talk to vendors. I mean, I would handle things as much as I could from the road, even when I wasn't on the payroll. But that's just how I handled that. And they liked this was more than just a favor. It started, well, the way I got in there was that Al had worked there. Okay. And the way Al had worked there is because they syndicated the Dr. Demento show. Mm-hmm. And he was able to get Al a job when Al finished school and needed to come home and pay some rent and so they got Al a job there. Now I had already met Al at that point, and I think I was doing something else anyway. The furthest thing from my mind was being a full-time drummer with Al. So I had another job doing something else, and it eventually quit that. And at some point Al had said, do you want a job at Westwood One? There was another guy in the mailroom, and he was on his way to the office manager to quit. So Al called me, knowing that I wasn't working at that time, and asked if I wanted to come down and apply. And I did, and got the job. And we went on our first tour a short time later, and Al did not come back, but I did. And this began a series of my coming and going. Again, it wasn't too chronic, but there was one year I was gone for like 5 months. I mean, it's hard to run a company and not have someone in place, but they were very, very good to me. And again, I think I balanced it very well. I dare say that would probably not ever happen again today. I don't think there's a company around that would let you do something like that. You would have to make a choice. It's like, you're going on tour every year or two, you disappear for 3 or 4 months, you have to make a choice. Mm-hmm. And I was not ever faced with that. I did eventually leave in 1996 after 14 years there. And, it was a really good, it kept me going financially, certainly, since Al's tours, were not a full-time thing. So I'm very thankful to them and grateful for the opportunity to have done that. But I did hold up my end of the bargain. They weren't just doing me a favor because of the Al and Demento connection. And it's like, well, we'll just let employees do what they want. It's like, no, you had to do your job. And I did. It's, at some point I became office manager and purchasing manager, and I immediately shave $2 million off their annual budget. Well, they love that.
Yeah,
I bet they did.
Yeah, companies tend to like that. Yeah,
Yeah, they didn't give any of that to me, but but again, there were other perks in working for them, such as being able to go and go do what I really wanted to do. And eventually I got to do that. And that was, but I was very, very grateful for them. And sadly, just a week ago, the founder of Westwood One, Norm Pattis, passed away.
Mhm.
And we don't know from what at this point, but that was very sad. And I'm still in touch with a ton of people. It's funny, the Westwood One connection. There were a lot of artists and writers and hopeful actors and stuff in there, and it was a day job for a lot of them. But again, they all gave it 100% when they were there. But it was a family. It was one of those companies where you really got to know people and became friends with people and socialized with them, to an extent outside of the company. And even after you were gone, and I'm still in close touch with many of my coworkers from the day, and who I consider close friends. And it was a really there's a group on Facebook for Westwood One employees. And of course, the talk in the last week has been about Norm, and a lot of cool stories coming out about Norm. And I've got some old pictures, that I shot, at the company. And but the Westwood One thing was very, very cool. Ever since, I can say that I've been a full-time musician, and that's a good feeling too.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Awesome.
Going through your book, Lights, Camera, Accordion, John, I didn't realize just how prolific, the band was, how many albums and tours that you guys did over the years. It was like one after the other. It was really interesting to think about that. Mandatory Fun, the last studio album, was released in 2014, which was a huge commercial success, right? #1 album, won the Grammy Award for Best Comedy Album. And I know that there is a new soundtrack for the movie Weird with the new song, Now You Know. But is there going to be a new album soon?
Of other Al material, I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, without a record contract, that does two things. One, it frees up Al to only put out stuff, not because it's contractually required, but to put out, stuff when he wants to, when he feels the songs are right, not just because, you got to get 12 songs out in the next, couple of years, or you're going to be in default of your contract. So Al is free to do stuff as he wishes, and frankly, we can get stuff out, immediately, as opposed to in the old days, if Al had songs, and we very often recorded all of the originals, for example, 6 originals per album. Those would be recorded well in advance of an album's release. Sometimes we didn't even know when an album would come out. It was just, well, I've got these originals, let's just get them done. So when the parodies, come into my head, we can just do those and then we'll put out an album. So basically some songs and even some parodies sat around for a little while before they would be released. And for example, on Mandatory Fun, I think now Handy was the single, and that was current at the time. It was extremely current, and that was great, except Word Crimes, which was already in the can, I thought was a better song. It was already a slightly older song. It would have been great if we could have released it when we recorded it, much earlier that year, I think it was. Would have been, hot on the heels of the original, which is always the goal. But we didn't have that luxury because contractually we couldn't really put anything out until we had 11 or 12 songs or whatever it was. Now, if Al has a brilliant idea for something, we can record just that one song. It doesn't, it's not contingent upon another 10 or 11 songs before it can be released. And Al can promote it and get it out, without the label's help, immediately. We can record something tomorrow and it can be mixed and out there in about 3 days. I mean, it can be wrapped up pretty quick, and except possibly for a video. But and he can promote it, and you almost don't need a label for that anymore. And in Al's position especially, he's not an independent, up and coming. I mean, he's an established artist with an established fan base. Apple Music and Spotify and all the rest will accommodate him if he says, I want to release this on this day, and you do that so you can promote it on that day. Will you do that? They go, oh yes, we'll do that. No problem. Anyone else before the labels could do that too. but an independent artist coming up who wanted their stuff out, they were put on the back burner. It would happen whenever it would happen, with iTunes back in the day,
Yeah.
or whoever it was. Al's got some pull. So an album, yeah, he would have to come up with 10 or 12 new things to make an album, but they would come out one at a time. I think we're going to have to wait until he completes, 11 or 12 singles, and then, till and then you put them out on albums just so they're, and re-release them all as a package. I don't think we're waiting for an album from him as much as we're waiting just for upcoming singles. And
Okay.
this Now qualifies as a single from the movie. And we also re-recorded, I should say, several early songs, so that mostly because we didn't have really good live versions that we could use, of us doing them back in the day. And also in some cases, in every case, I think it didn't make sense to try and license the original, studio master, and pretend it was live or something like that. It made more sense to re-record it. So I think, I Love Rocky Road, for example, when we did that, well, we did sort of a special version of that. We did that with Al starting on the accordion, and then the band sort of dribbled in. And if you've seen the movie, for those who have seen the movie, you can understand the scene where, Al's three roommates, who are, Jim, Steve, and I, supposedly,
Yeah.
we were not roommates, by the way. They see Al, stumbling out there, with his accordion. The audience doesn't like him. They say, "Come on, let's help him out." And they go out, and all of a sudden they go into the song. So that's one where we couldn't have used the studio version. But there was, for example, there was a scene in the movie where Daniel, as Al, was drunk and driving in his car and flipping around the radio, and every station had an Al song on. And one of the songs, one of the snippets was supposed to be "I Lost on Jeopardy." And it was supposed to be the studio version of "I Lost on Jeopardy." But that would have cost, a bunch of money to license that, to use, 10 seconds of it or whatever. And so we just re-recorded it, as close to the original. It was interesting going in and recording something and trying to sound like us having recorded it, trying to sound like Greg Kent. As we went back, we went in and recorded that, and it's very, very close. It sounds really good. And so that was one of those situations where we had the opportunity, but it was just cost prohibitive. And I think there were a few other things they did, however, and I'm not exactly sure why, but nice that they did use "Eat It," and that. And I don't know if it was just in the context of showing the video or what it was, but the original studio version of "Eat It" did get used. So we didn't have a hand in that. But we did, actually, no, that's not true either. We did, there was a thing on stage where he comes out and the band is going into "Eat It," and then they have to stop. And we recorded that because that just didn't exist on the studio album. So we did record a portion of it. But it was cool to go back and do "Like a Surgeon." We hadn't played sort of the original version of "Like a Surgeon" in many, many years. There was a point where we switched to Madonna's "Truth or Dare" version, kind of a very Middle Eastern sounding thing. And I think back in maybe the early 90s, we did that. So we went back and we had to actually listen to the things that we did. It's like, oh, this is, which was essentially like the record. So we had to go back and restudy what we had already done, and then duplicate what we had done, and make it sound kind of live. It didn't have to be absolutely sterile perfect, but so that was fun to go back and do those. And then all of those things, not "I Lost on Jeopardy," but all of those things are on the soundtrack album, which I think comes out on CD in maybe in February. I'm not absolutely sure. And then there's supposed to be a couple of vinyl versions coming out in the spring. One will be a colored vinyl, and the others, I assume, not colored. I don't know. One is pink vinyl, and the other is something else. So, more stuff for me to collect and put in the archive, I guess.
You mentioned, obviously the movie just recently came out. For you, what was it like to see yourself portrayed by Tommy O'Brien in the movie? To see, although a version of what it might have been like. What was that like, though, to see yourself up on the screen?
It was really interesting. I had actually and there's like 20 or 22 guys that had auditioned for my part, and I've got all of their audition tapes.
Oh, cool.
Not that, and I wasn't involved in the selection process. That's not why I have them. It's just Al, sent those. He said, I thought you might like to have these. And I said, oh, that's pretty cool. So I got a chance to watch all these guys, one, being me, but two, saying things that I never said. I mean, and in situations that never happened. Again, the movie is largely not true.
Sure.
And the very few facts in there. The fact that they used our real names is pretty good. It was very surreal to watch that. And Al knew early on that Tommy was one of the top choices. He says, what do you think? What do you think of these two or three guys in particular? And I had to agree that Tommy was really good. But he's also, and this is the same for the guys who play Jim and Steve, they also play the instruments that we play. Tommy's a drummer here in LA. And I have not met him in person, but I got in touch with him by email not long ago, and I've only been home from the tour a short time, but at some point I want to get a chance to meet him. But very nice guy, and one of the things he told me was in studying for the part, because now he's playing as a drummer, he's now playing the part of a drummer, so he's like a little more into this than just some other role that's maybe not musically oriented. So he said, and kind of, I know you shot a lot of pictures. I was thinking of bringing a camera and just kind of holding it in every scene, and just always having a camera with me, like you would have done. I said that would have been so cool. I mean, Al would have absolutely loved that, and would have got it, and that would just be one of those little Easter eggs for the fans that know, and they all know that I always had a camera around. I said, Tommy, you should have done it. You should have brought the camera. I mean, they can Photoshop it in or something, I guess. I don't know what they do for digital effects or whatever. CGI, yeah.
There was one scene though that I felt like it did pull from a touch of reality, and that was the scene where there's the pool party at Dr. Demento's, and your character is playing the accordion case as the song starts, which seems to harken back to your original meeting with Al. Can you talk a little bit about the original version of how you and Al came to meet?
Well, you can't get around the accordion case on that song. I mean, that's just what it is. This was not like an opportunity of, oh boy, let's finally do the Queen version of the song and do it right. It's like, no, that the accordion case version is the right version. Right. And we re-recorded that. I had to write out the arrangement for it just to make sure I got it exactly right. Now, I wasn't able to use the original accordion case because I beat the heck out of it on tour. I took it on tour like once or twice and just smashed it up. Now I still have it, but it's not playable. And I eventually, while we were still doing that on the road, I eventually went to a few other cases. But I had to source a case that would sound like that, and I found a drum case, like a nice suitcase for one of my snares, and it was the right size. And I thought, well, that's a good start. And I took the drum out and I put it down on the ground and I started beating on it. I said, this sounds like the old one. So I had I brought that into the studio and recorded with that. And one of the fans had put together they had edited a little bit of a mashup of the original version and the re-recorded version. And one thing you notice is that Al's voice is almost exactly the same. But the thing I noticed is that both of the suitcases sounded the same. I had nailed the sound of that, and but that was cool to see him do that. And it was maybe a move that only I caught. But there's a different way that I play that. And there's like every fourth beat or something, I slap the sides of the case. Sort of like a backbeat kind of a thing. And that's just something I did in the studio the night I met Al, and I'll get to that in a sec. But it was cool to see him. They had sort of a shot, and they had a little bit of the suitcase, but when it came time for that beat, you could see his arms go out and slap the side. I said, he gets it. Tommy knew what I did. Yeah. But in meeting Al, well, I should go back and say that back in the 70s, everybody who was in junior high or high school listened to the Dr. Demento show. And he was originally, for us, he was on the air just in Los Angeles. He wasn't syndicated yet, so nobody really around the country knew about him yet. But in the early 70s, I had sent in, Dr. Demento had a contest to send in a recording of a song that was very popular on the show. In fact, it was constantly voted as the #1 song. It was a song called Pico and Sepulveda. It was an older recording, I think, from the 40s. And it was just getting, it was ridiculous because it was always the #1 song. So he, in early 1973, pulled the song. He says, okay, we're going to run a Pico and Sepulveda contest. And we want all of you musicians out there, or whoever, to send in your version of the song. And the first prize, the #1 entry, will receive a 78 record of Pico and Sepulveda by Felix Figueroa. And I forget the actual artist's name, but he went by Felix Figueroa on there. So of course, me and some of my buddies, put together this version, sort of a horn version, because all I knew back in high school, I knew horn players. I really didn't know guitar players. And so we had like I think a French horn and trumpet and a saxophone. Saxophone player was Richard Elliott, who I went to school with. Richard became a very well-known sax player. Mm-hmm. I mean, if sax aficionados name their top 5 sax guys, you probably got, Kenny G is in there and stuff like that, maybe Clarence Clemens, but Richard Elliott will be in there. So I went to school with him. A guy on flute named Jeff Rona. Jeff went on to score a bunch of TV show things and movie things. Jeff also worked for Roland and was on the committee that invented MIDI back in '83. So he became quite a celeb. Sure. Another guy on trombone, Gary Feldman, became this is much, I know I'll get to Al, don't worry. Became like a top anesthesiologist here in LA, and is now on the board of anesthesiologists for Southern California. I don't know, something like that. And he said something very funny. I said, when I learned what he did, I said, "Oh, you put people to sleep?" He says, "No, I wake them up." So very funny. And if I had a drum with me, I would have gone boom. Anyway, so short story long. So we sent in our recording of it, and it didn't have vocals on it. It started out of us singing Pico and Sepulveda, and it kind of leads up. And then we just did an instrumental after that, because I don't think anybody really wanted to sing it. And we came in second. We came in second place out of like 100 entries. And Demento actually used our song for his theme song for a little while, because it didn't have lyrics in it, and he could talk over it at the opening of the show. And, so that was very, very cool. We thought, oh, this is really cool. So short time later, we did another recording, the Ballad of Woodsy Owl, and sent that in, and he played that too. And a little more time went by, and some of my friends and I got together again, and recorded a song called Mr. Ghost Goes to Town. And he played a few old versions of that on the show. And he played that too, typically on Halloween. And we thought, oh, that's really cool. So this is like 1975, I think. And that's the last thing we had sent to him. And a few years later, and this is through my brother, who one of his bandmates, and my brother was in the Neil Diamond band at the time, and one of his bandmates, Tom Hensley, piano player, was friends with Dr. Demento, and somehow got us invited down to come see him do a show at KMET here in Los Angeles. Come see him do a show live, and to meet him. I thought that'd be really cool, considering he played some of my stuff earlier on. And so we came down, we saw the show like that. Anyway, Demento that night, whatever night it was, he asked me if I wanted to come down, another time and do an interview and talk about having, this is 1980, talk about having sent stuff in early on and getting it played on the show. Because by this time, there was a lot of homemade music on the show. But at the time, I was maybe only the second only person to have his homemade stuff played on the show. And I thought, oh, I'd love to do that. And I came back, and it was September 14th, 1980. And Al was there that night. And Al was already a bit of a celebrity on the show. And he was there that night. He'd come down from school up north in San Luis Obispo. And he would come down on Sundays and hang out at the show, answer phones, read PSAs on the air, sometimes play some music, whatever. And Al had just written a song that weekend. In fact, he had been out sort of camping with Demento and some of the other Dementites. And then they all showed up at the show for the Sunday night. And he had written a song. He had written another one, Rides the Bus. And that was the night I was there. And he had originally asked one of the other Dementites, Bill Burke, if he wanted to, beat on the accordion case or something, while he was going to play the song on the air. And Bill was kind of hesitant about it. And I either volunteered, or Bill asked me, or Al asked me, but whatever it was, I ended up playing it. And then when we were done, we played it kind of in the middle of the top 10. There was a little gap in there, and Demento had rolled tape on it, and that became a single. Now, I'll get to that in a second. But Al, and then there's another thing going back to Pico and Sepulveda, but I'll tell you about that in 2 seconds. So after we were done, we played on the air. I said to him, I said, that was, that's a lot of fun. You should have a band. I'll be your drummer. And he said, okay. Not even knowing me at all, except that I just did an interview talking about some of the things I'd sent in and talking about, the bands I had been in. So he knew I was a drummer, at some point that evening. Anyway, that's how I met Al. So two things. First, I'll get to another one, Rides the Bus, in a second again. But it turns out that Al had also sent in a version of Pico and Sepulveda back in 1973. That was the first thing he had ever sent in. And nobody's ever heard it. And I don't know how it happens that Al didn't manage to keep a copy of it. Maybe that hadn't occurred to him that he would like to have a copy and to send, Demento the original, or the other way around, so he could keep a version of what he had done. Yeah. But there are no versions of that. And what happened, and I didn't find out till much later, and Dr. Demento himself told me, he says, well, Al gave me the tape at, I did an appearance at his school at Linwood High, and he gave me the cassette then, and I put it in my trunk. And then I sold the car, and the tape went with it. So the tape, and I think Demento said, I didn't have the heart to tell him he had missed the deadline, but whatever the case. So the tape went with the car and is gone forever, I'm sure. I'm sure whoever found the tape either threw it out immediately or listened to it and then threw it out. And so it never got, nobody's got a copy of that. That is the great lost tape of all time, because that was the very first thing. Yeah, that was the very first thing that he had sent Demento, and that was the very first occasion that I had something to send to Dr. Demento. Anyway, so we recorded this, we played Another One Rides the Bus. There was a tape of it, got made. First thing that happened is, by this time, by 1980, Dr. Demento was syndicated. He had been syndicated for the last 4 or 5 years before that. And he was being heard, across the country, in Canada, Armed Forces, radio services, I think maybe overseas in some cases. So, he's got a much bigger audience than just LA. And the syndicated show was not just the LA show that was, sent out, and then played, a week or two later. It was actually a different show, but based very much on the theme of the show, and with, I think the same top 5 or top 10 or whatever he was doing then. And that was a 2-hour show that would go out to all these other stations, like 180, 190 stations across the country. Mm-hmm. So within a few weeks, this Another One Rides the Bus that got played live that night, in LA, was included in the a syndicated show that aired a couple of weeks later. So now that's being heard in a lot of different markets. But the thing that happened was, a lot of the radio stations would play Dr. Demento like late in the weekend, like not just LA on a Sunday night. Anywhere else usually got played late on a Sunday night. Mm-hmm. Many of these stations in the bigger markets, in any markets, would have a morning drive time wacky DJ team or something, the morning zoo, whatever it was. Yeah. And they would often, the stations that ran the Dr. Demento show, those DJs would go in, the producer of the show would go in, listen to the previous night's Dr. Demento show to find some wacky songs to play. Mm. Well, the night that Another One Rides the Bus aired on the syndicated show, the next morning, the song was getting played in morning drive time in major markets, and which was huge. Sure. And that led to a huge leap in popularity for Al, who is now getting heard by people that maybe didn't listen to the Dr. Demento show but are hearing the song anyway, thanks to on their way to work or whatever. So the song became a single. Things with Al got rolling. Al got a manager. We appeared on the Tomorrow Show. Things really got moving. That was a huge step. Not to discount My Bologna, which was out on Capitol Records a year before. Mm-hmm. But that was everything he did was was a big step forward. It seems every new album and new parody became a big step forward. It kept escalating. And I mean, I got to see that very early on, how this thing that we did just for fun, proliferated across the country and became very popular. And TK Records, which was Casey and the Sunshine Band's label, I think that was they put that single out in early 1981, and I think it was the very last thing they did. I don't know if it was, they closed their doors. I don't know if it was because of that or if it was just a coincidence, but I think that might have been their very last release. And it was pretty cool, though. It was very cool to be part of this as it was happening. And it wasn't too much longer that we did, in fact, start to try and put together a band. And, within about a year and a half, we had Jim and Steve lined up just in time for the first album, and it has not changed since.
Very cool.
So that was a short story long. Sorry, I could have just said, I got an interview on the Dr. Demento show, and Al was there, and we recorded a song and decided I would play drums for him for the next 42 years. That would have been more merciful. But there are a lot of aspects to everything that I've done with Al, and every answer sort of requires a more background information, because there's just a whole lot that's gone on that's amounted to what this has all become, not only for him, but certainly for him, but for me as well, who basically been along for the ride and been able to keep up with him with his agenda for recording songs that are beyond what my capabilities were. And I had to grow with him, and I'm glad I was able to keep up.
Yeah. Awesome. Quick question about that first, album. I didn't realize this when I was younger, but Rick Derringer was the producer, he was in the McCoys. He was, had a Hoochie Coochie, what was it?
Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo.
Hoochie Coo, along with work with, among many other artists.
Oh, yeah.
Since he was like the first producer, were you a little bit like seems really interesting pairing, I guess is
it is, and there's a story behind how that happened. Of course there is. Well, first I should say that when Jim and Steve came along, actually Steve came along first, in time for the first album, and we knew who Jim was. He wasn't quite on board. He must have shown up literally as we were beginning to record, because he didn't rehearse with us. He didn't record the album, most of it. Rick Derringer recorded most of the guitars on the album. So that first album was me and Steve J on bass and Rick Derringer on guitar. I mean, I did an album with Rick Derringer. That was pretty cool. And Al played some accordion too, that Al guy. And Rick continued to produce the following 5 albums. So I think he produced everything through UHF in 1989, and then his contract was up. Well, Al became the producer after that. He's got a keen eye and a keen ear. He became a very good producer. He became a very good director after being involved with so many videos, and he took the reins on a lot of those things. So the way we encountered Rick was in seeking permission for one of Al's parodies. Al, early before the albums, was starting to realize he needed to get permission to put stuff out, because we had done a parody of the Beatles' Taxman called Pac-Man. We did that in December of 1981, and it got played a bit on the Dr. Demento show, and got a lawyer from George Harrison's people, got a cease and desist from George Harrison's lawyers, and said, don't do that. So Al thought, what, I guess a good idea to get permission on stuff now. And the very next thing to come up was I Love Rocky Road, for I Love Rock and Roll. Now, in getting permission, it's not always getting permission from the artist, because the artist isn't always the writer. Joan Jett did not write that song. She had the hit with it, but she was not the first to do it, and she was not a writer. So there were a couple of writers on that, and one of them was a guy named Jake Hooker. And Jake was, it was a group called the Arrows. And somewhere online, I know on YouTube, there's a version of the Arrows doing I Love Rock and Roll. And it's not too dissimilar from Joan Jett's, although Joan's is a lot slicker. And it's a lot different with a girl singing it than with the guys, guy group singing it. So in getting permission from Jake, and I guess he was one of the writers who was easiest to reach first, Jake said, yeah, that sounds good. I've Rick Derringer is one of my clients. We'll get him to produce it. We'll get some studio time, and so basically through Jake and through Rick, we got some spec time at Cherokee Studios here in LA, famous, very busy studio. And we went in and we cut the first album, on spec, meaning nobody got paid. Not even Rick, I don't think. Not then, he didn't. And that became, and then no label. There was no label yet. We just had, 10 or 11 songs or whatever it was. And then came the job for Al's manager to shop the record, to find a label. And eventually he did. I think by the end of 1982, he, Al and Jay and the Scotti brothers signed a recording contract. Of course, we already had the recording, but they pointed out quite, astutely, said, well, some of this stuff is quite old. I Love Rock and Roll is a little dated at this point as well. The parodies have to be really, it's a timing thing, for the most part. And if the song isn't correct timing, like doing Yoda for Lola, taking an almost 10-year-old song or whatever, at least the Yoda thing was current, or again with the Star Wars thing, American Pie was a fairly old song by the time we did The Saga Begins, but again the theme of the song was current. So there has to be some current tie-in. So they said, we need you to record, another song or two. And we want to put out, I think, albums. The deal was for 12 songs per album. So the new parody that came up was Ricky, a parody of Tony Basil's Mickey, which again, she was not the writer on that. That was not that song was done by a group called Racy, R-A-C-E-Y, and that version is on YouTube as well. And so had to go to those people to get the permission. And this was a common theme throughout Al's career, because again, the artist did not always write the song, and you had to go to the songwriter to get permission. To when it came to the legalities of splitting publishing and writing and all that stuff. And that was actually a little bit of a bone of contention when Achy Breaky Song came out, because that was a real slam on both the song and kind of on Billy Ray Cyrus. And Billy was not happy with it, but it was not his song. I was like, sorry, but I went through all the right channels and got permission from the person that can say yes. And sorry that was really maybe the only song that took a very obvious poke at the artists and his song. Yeah. I think that's the only time that probably really ever happened. But at any rate, when and with the first album, and then they needed one more song, and we did. I think we did. It was Buckingham Blues, I think. Was what was re-recorded, and that actually went back. That started out as a parody of the Ballad of Jack and Diane by John Cougar Mellencamp, whatever. And we have a couple of demos, and Al kept running, and I guess he had to run it by John Cougar because I'm certain he was the writer on it. And John Cougar didn't really want it. He didn't want a straight parody of it, and so we did a slightly twisted different version, and he didn't like that either. Then we did another version, and I think it had gotten so far from what Al wanted, and that he completely changed it and changed it into an original, the Buckingham Blues. So I think we recorded that, and that gave us our 12 albums for 12 songs for that first album. And then a tour was planned, and it was not really our tour. It was Dr. Demento's road show, and we went out as his musical act. So, but we had a great time. I think I know that was the first time that either Al or I had really been on the road. We went and played Toronto. We played the El Macambo, famous club in Toronto, on that first tour. It was very, very cool. It was really cool. We had to do all the driving, but that's okay. Bands do that, when they're starting out. There was no budget to hire drivers or buses or crew, even somebody to make sure that things sounded good from night to night. God forbid. You'd want to have some consistency. Well, it was expensive, so we just sort of winged it, and it was okay. you know, and it worked out, and it was, you know, we did it right. You know, we grew up with the whole touring thing, you know, by starting out very grassroots,
Yeah.
and into a pretty slick organization, you know, and very consistently great shows, you know, even with all of the technology that exists, and back in the day, all the mishaps that could occur thereof. We made it. You know, nobody asked for their money back, and had they wouldn't have got it anyway. So sorry, no refunds. No, we never. There was never a show so terrible that Al really felt beholden to the audience. It's like, you know, sometimes things happen. We got through it. You know, we came back on stage or whatever it was, and we continued the show. And, you know, we did fine. You know, there are worse things to happen. You know, ask fans of Morrissey what happens when he, one, doesn't show up for a show, or two, shows up and then walks off stage 30 minutes later, like he did here in Los Angeles at the Greek Theater in front of 6,000 people. Oh, it's it's cold. I have to go. Geez, you're from England. What do you, how cold does it get there? This is LA. What was it? Was it like 60 out? I'm sorry. Anyway.
My wife is a huge Morrissey fan. I pick on her all the time about it.
I hope she got to see him part of the time.
She's seen him, yeah, many times. She dragged me once too. I must add, I've seen Morrissey in concert.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, you know what? I honestly, I don't know any of his solo work, but of course I'm familiar with the Smiths, and you know, and enjoyed that.
You know, you mentioned about obviously those early days touring, and the book obviously speaks to that. We see so much of the visuals of those early days of, you know, being in the RV and you know, upgrading to the bus and all that good stuff. Just for the moment, when you're out on tour back in the early 80s, you see the crowd coming in. Now flash to 2022, you see the crowd coming in. How has it changed? Is it a similar sort of vibe from the people that are coming to the shows? Is it different ages that you're seeing at the shows? What's that like?
Well, the vibe is the same. They're there to see Al. You know, they're sure, fans. Yeah. Nobody wanders into an Al show not having any idea what they're going to see, unless one of their friends dragged them in, you know, and is trying to convert them. But nobody just wanders in because they had nothing to do that night. So they're all on our side. The demographic has definitely changed. You know, in the early days, and again, this was via Dr. Demento. The fans of the Dr. Demento show at the time were like fans of Monty Python and the Three Stooges. It was young males, right. Predominantly, I mean, seriously, predominantly male. So we saw very few females in the audience, you know, at that time, you know, certainly through the mid 80s, very few females. And they were also mostly younger. I mean, it was mostly college age. You know, there weren't any very young people in there. There weren't any, you know, nobody, I would think, much past 25 or 30 for the most part. And that demo changed over the years. I don't know exactly when, but if you go to one of our shows now, well, first off, some of the younger fans then are still coming to the shows. So they're, you know, they're 60. So you're seeing people that rival the age of us on stage. And we're seeing younger fans as well. There's 6 and 8 year old kids out there. There's some people that brought very young, like not infants, but I mean babies, and they'll put like ear muff protectors on them. I mean, that's the right thing to do. But you know, I don't know that they can even, maybe they couldn't find a babysitter, or maybe the babysitter was also at the Al show that night. But it's a very wide demo, and it's very evenly split now. There's a lot of couples. You know, it's very 50-50 male female. So it's the age range is much wider, and the gender gap has been almost eliminated, and it's a very it's almost a mainstream audience, you know, apart from being Al fans. So that's really the big difference. I mean, it's you know, a lot of the fans have hung in there with us, which is great, you know, to grow up with them and them to grow up with us. But they are bringing their kids, and there are new kids coming in, and that's what will keep us going. For as long as Al wants to, really, and his statement on that is, as long as people keep paying to see me, you know, we'll keep doing this. You know, as long as the audience is there, we'll keep. You know, when they go away, we go away. And as it is with any performer or actor or a business or anybody that depends on public participation, you know, when the public stops participating, you know, that's the end of it.
Yeah.
Now,
But
oh, sorry, Tim.
no, I was just going to say, to your point, Greg and I grew up, listening to you guys, and continue to listen, all through our lives. And now our kids are, just on the early days of teenage years, and Greg's older boys are on the upper end of that. But new fans, new young fans that are fans of the music. So,
well, thank you. Well, much appreciated.
Yeah.
Tell your friends.
I was just going to say that the current tour, which is the Ill-Advised Vanity Tour, plays only original songs, which I think is an absolutely amazing idea. What have been the fans' reactions when it's just original songs?
Well, a lot of the fans think the originals are better than the parodies.
I'm one of them.
Well, there you go. And we had done this tour, this theme back in 2018 as well, which is when we learned that the fan response was really good, really strong, mostly sold out shows. And that was the case on this past tour. Well, we're actually not done with it. We're continuing in the spring. The fans' reactions has been great. And the fact that we are also changing up the set list every night. We're pulling from about 37, 38 originals that we've worked up, and every night, and I'm not sure how Al accomplishes it without a lot of work. He has made sure that every night is a different set list. And there's enough songs to make enough combinations to have got us through those 133 shows. I assume. I mean, I'm not going to go and check and see if any are the same, but if he says they're not, they're not. And what that does is, one, for the fans that come to repeat shows, and there are many that do, and I'm not just talking about in the same region, but they will fly across the country and kind of tour chase, I guess. And we'll see them and it doesn't bother us. I mean, that's very cool. I mean, a lot of these fans have become friends of ours, and it's very cool to see them there. But they will come and see different shows because they know they're going to see a slightly different show every night. And although they're the same ones that would come see the regular full production show, knowing that they were going to see the same show. I mean, they would still come and see us several times. But that's like, you listen to one of your favorite albums. You don't expect it to be different every time you listen. Or you go to see a movie, you buy a DVD of a movie and you watch it, several times. You don't expect it to be different. You watch it several times because you like it. And they like the show that we do. And but in particular, this originals, the No Frills Tour, as we call it, because we're not running video, we're not using any tracks. Al has to play on a lot of these songs to fill in some of the parts. The fans love it. It was interesting when we were putting a lot of these songs together in 2018 for that tour. We hadn't played a lot of these songs live before, and in fact, some of them we hadn't even played as a band. When we're in the studio, as time went on, a lot of times we would record just drums first and get that out of the way. And if I was happy with my part, Steve would come in and do his part. And it's not, and you would never know it to listen to it. But with Al, when I say Al became a very good producer, he's really good about wanting stuff to sound exactly. He knows when it sounds exactly like it's supposed to sound. And we're on board with him as well. So, there were songs that we played that we never ever played as a group. And there were songs that, maybe we had played on early tours, and then as more and more songs, new albums came out, more songs in the repertoire became available. Some songs got cut from the list, songs we hadn't played in 30 or 35 years that we had to relearn those. So there were a lot of rehearsals, and for us, a lot of rehearsals is like 10 to learn, like, it was like 45 or 50 songs or something.
Wow.
And that's for some bands, I don't understand how some bands will go in the studio and rehearse for 2 months. I don't get it. I don't know what they're working up that they don't already know. I mean, even if you're teaching a bunch of musicians that didn't ever play the parts to begin with, it's not that hard to learn. You give somebody the record and they learn their part, and you teach them maybe some endings or some different arrangements, and they know the song. You don't need 2 months to do that. I don't get it. We went through and did all that stuff. Again, we were familiar with the songs, but a lot of this stuff we had never played. So we had to learn a lot of that stuff from scratch. Coming back on this most recent tour, a lot of the songs were revived, and the rehearsal schedule was cut like in half because it was just more of a refresher rather than having to learn things. Although there were some songs that we had to go over and learn. There were some one aspect also, and this was a favorite of the fans, is for the encore we would play a straight cover song on these ill-advised tours. Now, in 2018, there were like 77 shows. We did 77 different cover songs.
Oh my
We
gosh.
had to learn. We didn't learn them up front. We learned them as the tour progressed, but we had to play 77 different songs, some of which were not familiar to everybody, and some of which we all knew. I mean, we all know. I saw her standing there by the Beatles or something. I don't know if we did that, but I'm just saying, that those kind of songs we all know. On this the 2022 tour, we cut that number down by quite a bit, and so that's a lot of stuff to go through. We pulled out a bunch of songs, added a few new ones, but we got it down to, I think, about 45 different covers, and that we would play each one over the course of the tour. They would each get played up to 3 times, and that would cover us for 133 dates. And so we were, there was a lot less rehearsal for that, but every day we would do a sound check, which consisted more of us working on the cover song that we were going to do that night, because that wouldn't have been a song that we would have possibly, like one of our other originals that we would have played the night before, or played 3 or 4 times that week already. This was something that just comes out of the blue. Maybe we hadn't played it since 2018. In the beginning of the tour, a lot of these songs were already 4 years since we had played them. So we would rehearse those, and that was our sound check. Was going through and just working on whatever the cover was that night. And very often we would do it one time and just look at each other and go, okay, we got it. We remember, or we nailed it, or whatever it is. And so these tours are a lot of fun for us, and a lot of fun for the fans. And we do it for the fans. We don't do this for us. If we did, we wouldn't put ourselves through the rigorous travel and expense of. We would just find a rehearsal room and sit and play for each other, and and just have a good time, and go and have a pizza for lunch. And we do it for the fans, and we have a very great appreciation for them. A lot of artists sort of think that just goes along with what they do, but it doesn't, because the fans can lose interest, or the band can stop being good, and in our case neither has happened. We haven't had any, and again, this touches on the age thing. I don't think we sound, if anything, we sound better than we did 30 years ago, as younger players. I think we sound as good or better, and the audience appreciates that too. They know when you start to get old and can't play anymore that it's time for everyone to pack it in. And unfortunately, the artist will be the last to know when he goes and plays a theater and only a few hundred tickets have sold. I think that's a good sign. Well, I don't know if that will ever happen with us. It just keeps growing and growing, and we're very grateful for that. So the fans love what we do, and we appreciate that.
And we appreciate all the years and quality that you've been putting out. It's always fun for us on the other end of it. So keep doing it.
Thank you. Thanks.
So I think at this time, Greg, unless you have any other questions, do you want to entertain our NBA game that we had talked about? Or if you don't, that's fine too.
It's okay.
I know we could try it. I remember you described it a little bit in one of the emails. I don't remember, something about 70s, 80s, 90s.
Yeah. So okay. Yeah. So the game is we have one for the 80s or the 90s. So whatever decade you feel your knowledge is better at, we could do either one. If you prefer the 80s or you prefer the 90s, it's
well, in the context of what?
Right. So we'll give you 3 names, and you have to identify what category they fall into. So for example, if you wanted to do 80s, we'll give you 3 names. You have to identify which one is a mall store, which one is an Atari video game, and which one is a band.
And
okay, how about we just do B from the 80s? I don't know anything about the Atari games, and although I did have Pong around 1970, 71. So yes, let's try it 80s then.
Sure. Okay. So I'll go to Tim first, and we'll put him on the spot. And so you can see how he does. Yeah, so
I'll do terrible, so you'll definitely win. So.
Well, I'll get the band. I don't know about the other stuff.
Yeah.
All right, Tim. These are your 3 names: Burgers, Duke Jupiter, and Cask and Flask.
So that first one was burgers,
Yes.
and then Duke Flask.
Duke Jupiter.
Oh, Duke Jupiter. Okay.
And then Cask and Flask.
All right. I will go with oh man. All right, I'll go Cask and Flask is the mall store. Duke Jupiter is the Atari game, and Burgers is the band.
So close. 1 point. So yeah. So Duke Jupiter is the band.
Okay.
And their hit song was Little Lady.
Okay.
And then that would mean Burgers was the Atari game.
Okay.
So you got 1 point.
Oh, I get it. Okay. All right. Yeah. We'll try that.
Give it a shot. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, John. Your 3 are Outlaws, Cloak and Dagger, and Tweeter.
Outlaws is the band. Cloak and Dagger is the store, and Tweeter is the Atari game.
So close. But you were right about Outlaws, but Cloak and Dagger is an Atari game and Tweeter is a store.
Oh,
now,
there you go. So we're tied. Okay,
Yeah,
let's do the 90s now.
You do get a bonus point. Can you tell us the hit song from the Outlaws?
No.
Okay. It was Ghost Riders in the Sky.
Oh, which they also did not write, by the way. Because that goes back to the 40s or 50s. Okay. Wow. That's a tough game.
It is a tough game, yeah.
You and having an MBA doesn't help, I guess.
No. Having a good memory does, but we find that it's all sort of foggy now.
Oh boy. Now you know what? I don't remember Tweeter being a store. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, that's okay. We don't remember half the stuff either. So. That's what's kind of fun about it is remember for us, we try to be nostalgic, for our show and remind our listeners of, things from their youth. So, yeah. We'll call it a draw. How's that?
Yeah,
okay.
Sounds good. So, just real quick, coming back to the book, John, you kind of end with a question of whether or not you'll shoot film again one day, now that everything's kind of converted over to a digital format. And it's interesting because my daughter, she's 14, and just this past weekend, she asked me to dig out my old film camera from college and show her how to shoot an old digital SLR camera. So it sort of made me think, do you see a future where film kind of comes back around and makes a dent in digital, or do you think we're kind of destined to be in a digital format from here on out?
No, I think, I think there'll be certain people that will, embrace film. I mean, I don't know if anyone on a professional level is still using film. There are too many advantages to digital, to high quality digital. Mm-hmm. One thing I noticed, and I don't have one yet, but the new iPhones, and I'm sure all of the new phones, the quality is astonishing. Mm-hmm. It is absolutely, these 24 megapixel pictures coming from just this little phone are absolutely astonishing. They're so clear. They rival the really nice DSLRs, very nicely, and without that expense and without the weight and the size and all that. I film almost certainly went away for a while, and I think it's coming back a little bit. There's a place that there's like a photo lab not far from me that actually still processes film. Mm-hmm. And I think they still sell film, and it can be done. I haven't had an urge to go back. I don't honestly, I don't miss it at all. And part of that is I was reminded of that in the 18 weeks solid every day, every stinking day that I scanned negatives back in 2021 when I was sitting at home when I should have been on tour. 18 weeks in a day. Wow. Every day. And I was reminded of all the cool things that my cameras can do, and all of the bad things that happened, the blurry things, the things that were hopelessly under or overexposed through whether it was my fault or the camera got tricked or I didn't know to check something or whatever it was, that doesn't happen as much with digital cameras, or that you can't, see what's coming with a digital camera, that you can't see on its display what you're going to get and know if you need to make an adjustment for it. So I think the potential for digital, obviously, for getting better photos just far outweighs, except in controlled situations, except in a studio situation, far outweighs carrying a film camera and just taking snapshots, which is what I did, for all my years. I mean, I'm not a photographer as much as I am a camera holder, who just endlessly shot photos. And I can only imagine what the expense was, especially at a time when, when I didn't make as much money, didn't have as much money, and 29 cents a photo to get them printed was a lot of money, back then, and would would be considered a lot of, whatever that would be worth now, $1.50 or something. It was a lot of money I spent on a lot of these photos that didn't turn out good. I would have loved to have had a digital camera. I'm sure I would have shot more. The flexibility of being able to deal, the immediacy of a digital file, the ability to manipulate it. It's already in a digital realm. You don't have to digitize a frame of film in order to manipulate it. There are just too many advantages. I don't know that it would come back as a practical medium. I think everyone agrees. And if you think, well, digital looks too perfect, it's too sterile. If you get, well, then you go into Photoshop and you put film grain on it. You can make it whatever you want. There are things you can do to digital that you cannot do with film. Yet there's no aspect of film that you can't do with digital. I mean, the digital realm covers it all. And finally, now again, there was about a 10-year overlap, and I point this out in the book once or twice, where I shot both digital and film, because I knew at the time that one couldn't replace the other. I knew that digital certainly was not up to speed. My very first camera, and I think it was Sony's first digital camera, DSC F1 or something like that, and it shot 640 by 480 was the pixel size, was the image size, which again, that filled up a whole screen of your computer. Not now. It's hopelessly small now. Quality was not great. I still have all those original files I shot. And I look at them and it's like, if I ever do a book of my digital photos of Al, I would have to either make these small, or if I wanted to feature them as a larger photo and you could start to see the pixels, I would have to add explanations about it. This was early digital. This was 1997. It's, anyway, it took a while before digital cameras for me were able to rival film. And, obviously I liked the lack of expense of having to deal with film. And the size of digital cameras, they didn't really have digital SLRs back then, not that I could afford. Everything was like a compact camera, a point and shoot. There were too many advantages. And now with the quality that you get, and again, even with the new phones, the quality is astonishing. It's absolutely, it's beautiful. And the phones let you manipulate them. And, you can do all sorts of things. And if you want to post it on Facebook, you don't have to import it to a laptop. It just goes right from the phone as well. Everything digital is just so correct for the way we live. And with what we do with photos, with images, to go back and rely on film, I don't see it happening. I think now it's a novelty. I think it's just so you can say, I've got a film camera, and I don't even know if you can buy new film cameras. I'm not sure that anybody is making a film camera anymore.
It's a good question. I don't know.
And I don't know that they need to. I mean, honestly, my cameras from the 70s and 80s are perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Not all of them survived, but the ones that survived are perfect, as operational now as they were then. I'll tell you about one film camera. It was the last film camera I bought in 2002. Which was pretty ambitious because I was heading heavily into digital by that time. But last film camera was a Contax T2, and it's a point and shoot camera, but it has some manual aspects to it. I think you can manually focus if you want. It does some cool things, and it's got a Zeiss lens on it, and it was pretty high end point and shoot. This is like when Annie Leibovitz would just carry a camera with her at all times. It was a Contax, either a T1 or T2. And the pictures I took with that are stunning. It could do no wrong. But again, at this point, and I was developing websites and stuff, and you know, dealing with you know, converting photos for the web. At this point, you know, digital was really, you know, an advantage to me. You know, as opposed to me having to get prints of something, you know, which took a day or an hour or whatever it was. Then I'd have to scan that. Then I'd have to and I was at the mercy of whatever the quality of the print was. You know, digital was very quickly becoming apparent to me to be a superior medium. And I don't remember the last pictures I ever shot with that Contax. Probably 2006. I think the pictures in the last chapter of the Straight Outta Linwood shoot, I believe those were taken with that camera. And it is, and I still have it. And those cameras fetch like $1,800 now. I mean, it's a very, for people that want a film camera, I think they have to buy a you know, secondhand camera, and those are very highly desirable. If I ever need to make a killing, I'll put that on eBay. And last time I checked, I mean, back in the day, I paid $400 for it, which I thought was a lot of money in 2002. But they fetch big bucks now. So for those that want to shoot film, I have a Contax T2 for only $2,200 shipped. I'll pick up the shipping. So, but you know, long story short, no, I think film has run its course. It's a novelty now, and I think it will be done, you know, in the next 10 years when people get tired of that, you know, sort of like, and I don't want to say vinyl is the same thing, but let's say cassettes. Cassettes have kind of come back, not in a big way, but if you want to get cassettes made, you can get cassettes made, believe it or not. Getting a cassette player is another challenge, I think, at this point. But vinyl has come back, and vinyl does have a different vibe. And there's the physicality, there's the size, there's the artwork, there's the whole thing, there's the package that comes with a lot of these things. I think vinyl is still a viable format, even though it had waned for a while. But CDs have done the same. Everybody, again, it's this whole digital thing, and largely, and I mean MP3s, the quality isn't where CD quality is at. The difference being everyone accepts it, though, because you're listening through a device. You know, you're not listening on a great system, on an audio system. You know, you're listening on a laptop that's got some speakers, or with headphones, or with earbuds, and you know, or through a car radio via Bluetooth, and that's it. That's the quality you get. So there's, you know, there's a difference there. You know, with vinyl, you have to put it on a physical device and listen to it on a real system. And if you've got a turntable, chances are you've got a real system, a proper audio system. And so there's a sound there. There's a feel. There is an analog sound, and you can tell it. You can tell the difference. So I think, you know, unlike film, where, you know, that analog grain, you can create that very simply. And you can vary the degree of it very simply, and you can make it whatever you want. And you know, from a digital photo, you can make it as analog as you would like it to be. You know, you can shoot movies and put dust scratches in it, you know, like it's old film. You know, you can have it, you can go back to, you know, the bad color of the 50s and 60s, you know, with these little apps that shoot, you know, 8mm looking film. You can include sprockets in it if you want. Like it's I mean, it's incredible what you can do digitally that you could not do, you know, and control it in an analog situation. If you had dust and scratches on film, and who didn't, you can't control that. You can only control it in the digital realm. So again, film, not so much anymore. With all due respect to going through and showing her how to use the camera, I think A versus B, that B, the digital, you know, has to win out every time.
Sure. Greg, did you have any other questions?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to John. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for the insight into you know, the past 40 years of your history at Weird Al, and it's been very cool. And thank you for taking the time to hang out with us for a while and play our stupid game.
Well, it wasn't that stupid. No, it's my pleasure. I know some of my answers are long-winded, but I mean, there are very few simple answers in my life. There are very few yes or no questions for me. Every answer requires a couple of other responses to sort of set it up. So I apologize for being long-winded.
No, not at all.
No, we appreciate it. And it's really been a joy to have the opportunity to talk to you. And, just in wrapping up, do you want to share any details of the upcoming tour or any other specifics about how people can purchase the book that's best for you?
Nope.
Okay.
Oh, see, now you get the short answer. No, you know what? The book is available anywhere books are available, online at the Big A Company or the Big B&N bookstore company, or or the Big WM, the Walmart or Target, or what? Anywhere that sells books sells Lights, Camera, Accordion, and it makes a great gift. So if this is out before Christmas, cool. If not, somebody's birthday is coming up. If not, they're going to have a Christmas every year for a while. So, so yeah, anywhere online sells the book, and I think everyone would enjoy it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, it's so cool to get to talk to someone like you, and just how nice and easy to talk to you are. It was really a joy for us. So thanks again.
Okay. Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Yeah. Keep me posted when this comes out. I'll get the photos together this afternoon.
All right.
Awesome. Where are you guys based?
We're in Pennsylvania.
Oh, whereabouts?
We're about 45 minutes north of Philadelphia.
Okay.
So
cool.
The Lehigh Valley.
Okay. Yeah. We played. Is there a school in Lehigh Valley or something?
I think you guys played Lehigh University.
Maybe years ago.
Yeah.
Like in the 80s, maybe early 90s.
I think it was around then. Yeah.
I remember that. That's funny. My wife just got a whole series of letters, all postmarked from Lehigh Valley.
Huh. That's cool.
Really?
I won't tell you why, but she got like 5 of them, and they were all long story, short story, long story. Yeah, I'll tell you a quick story about the Philly show, not the show, but when we were there, and this was like a couple of days before the tour wrapped. We came into town, I guess the morning of the 27th, which was a Thursday. We had that night off, and then the next night we were playing. I forgot the theater, but the night off, the Philly Film Festival was going on, and the night we had off was the night they were showing Weird, the movie.
Oh, get out of here!
And so we all went down there, and Al came out on stage and did a little sort of an introduction for it. But we all got to see it. We had all seen it before, but we got to see it for the first time, the band and the crew, on a big screen and with an audience, with the audience reaction. And that's when I knew that it was going to be a hit, because they loved it. They loved every bit of it. And I had watched it again with my wife on the day it had premiered on Roku after I'd gotten home. And we watched it. So it's us just sitting there, without any audience around us and without any other reactions. Of course, I knew what was coming. She's seeing it for the first time, and it was like dead quiet. And I saw the movie again, like in a different, from a different perspective, and I already knew, I think it's pretty dramatic at times. It's a fairly dramatic comedy, very well acted, and it was just interesting to see how many things suddenly weren't so funny when there weren't a bunch of fans watching it, and things seemed a little more dramatic and matter of fact than comedic. And that's not good or bad. I'm just saying there's a lot of aspects to the movie. I think it's a very well done movie, and I hope it doesn't get discounted or overlooked or anything just because it's kind of about Weird Al, or because it's streaming, or any of these other things that prevent it from being eligible for Oscar consideration or stuff like that, as they're saying. But I thought it was a really good movie. But it was interesting, in Philly we actually got to see it on the big screen, and it was really cool. And when the audience was laughing through pretty much the whole thing, I thought, okay, this is going to be a hit. When this gets wide distribution, it's going to get really good reviews. And it did. It got really, really good reviews. They're working on distribution, I think, worldwide. That wasn't the original plan. And it'll be interesting to see if the soundtrack album is released worldwide, at least the CD. And while we're traveling through Europe and Australia, I'll be checking the record stores like I usually do, looking for some of our old product that I don't have, used at this point, of course, but hopefully as a new CD, it should be out by then. And it'll be interesting to see if there's a foreign manufactured version of it, because I collect those as well.
Yeah.
And,
well, to your point, I would add that Weird was awesome, but that scene with Daniel Radcliffe when he's in the diner, it's really sad. When he's talking to Madonna. I mean, it really is, heartfelt and and well acted, like you said.
They were all really good. I mean, even down to the people that you don't think matter, even down to the sort of the cameos. I mean, everyone really played their part so well. It was just, it's not like it was a joke. It was filmed or videoed or whatever properly. I mean, the mood, the lighting, everything, the angles, everything was done really, really well. This was not just some throwaway fun project with a few big names to, gain some attention. This is a really well done piece. And hopefully people will see it that way, and not, there's other people that see it and they say, oh, this, none of that's true. This is terrible. Those things didn't happen. They've kind of missed the point, and that's why Al, in doing all the press, even before November 4th, when it premiered, would make sure to sarcastically say, and every word is true. He would, you knew he was telling you that almost every word was not true.
Yeah.
And so, but once you get past that, or even if you're not an Al fan, and don't expect to learn anything from it, it's still a good piece. I mean, I thought it was really, really well done. And not just because somebody's in there pretending to be me, because again, none of that stuff happened the way you see it. We were not roommates. We did not know we were not a band before My Bologna. We were not, those things didn't, but it wasn't meant to be a documentary, so it's okay.
Yeah.
It's the anti-documentary.
Can I ask you one last question? I'm sorry.
Oh, sure.
We were watching the movie as a family, and the scene actually in the diner, which leads up to that whole fighting scene. Is that the big, tall gentleman? My son swears it's Keanu Reeves. And I'm like, that is not Keanu Reeves.
Oh.
No, right?
No, I don't know. No.
Oh, okay. He's swearing it.
there was one cameo for sure, and it sort of went by me, and I don't think it was credited. I don't think, but Josh Groban was in there.
The waiter, right?
The waiter. And you look at him, you think that looks like Josh Groban, and it is. and I don't think he's credited in it. But I'd have to go back and look at the credits and all that. But there were several people in there that didn't get credits. For the guy that played Coolio, sitting again, he didn't have a speaking part, but he was not credited, not in the film anyway. There was just, for whatever reason, they just maybe they didn't want the credits to be that long. As it was, that song, the Now You Know, that runs over the credits was actually shortened, was edited. It's a longer song. It was edited to fit the length of the credits. They I guess they didn't want to run them any slower than they did to accommodate the song or whatever it was, but the song was tailored, more to the length of the credits. There is a longer version of that. I think at some point, I don't know if that's available anywhere as a song, or actually, you know what, on the album, I suspect on the album, it's the full length. I haven't checked. I have a recording of the stuff on the album, and I haven't checked to see if it's actually the full length, but there's like a single or something of it that has to do with the movie, and that's the edited version.
Interesting.
So there is an edited version for any radio stations that think they need to play it, but the full version is on the CD, and then there's also bits from the movie that'll be on. It's a double CD, double LP when it comes out. And again, I think the CD comes out it was bumped from maybe January to February, or February to March, or something like that. And I'm supposed to get one here at the house at some point. So I'm sure when I come back from Australia, there'll be, I'm supposed to get a CD and each of the albums, each of the colored albums. So when those come out, so we'll see how that happens. Anyway, I'm glad you enjoyed the movie, though.
Oh, it was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic. And just thinking back to it, the early scenes where Al is obviously played as, the child version of him playing the accordion. I think I had read that you played the accordion too when you were a kid. Is that true?
I took accordion lessons, and I held an accordion, and I could play badly play a few songs. It was interesting at some point, actually, I think in 1985, and we were somewhere, and it was the first time maybe I had let Al know I had played the accordion before I learned to play drums, and I picked up his accordion, and just complete muscle memory from 20 years before, played like this bad song on there, and I think he was really impressed and somewhat mortified. I have my father's accordion. Maybe that's why I took accordion lessons, is because he played accordion. And I have my father's accordion, and it's and I pulled it out of its case in 2021, again, a year where there was nothing going on except scanning photos. And I pulled it out and could actually kind of play that one bad song. And I don't even remember the name of the song, but it was something out of the, volume 1 accordion primer from 1964 or whatever it was. And I could still, again, muscle memory, I could still do those couple of things like that. The story of Little Sucker Thumb, is just muscle memory. It's just, it's in my DNA, and I can rattle it off anytime, correctly. And which surprises even me, because there's I don't know the lyrics to our songs, because I don't sing. I hear them, I just don't sing them. They don't come from me ever. But things that come from me, I can usually replicate 30, 40, 50 years later.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So there you go.
My mom played the accordion and then took this long hiatus, and then within the last maybe 10 or 15 years she got it out, and my dad keeps buying her more accordions. So I think she has like 5 or 6 accordions now. So it's really
wow.
Yeah. So.
That's well, fortunately I only have one, and I don't use it very often, but at some point I should pull it out again and see if I can still play it a year later. See it, I don't know, or not.
Well, let us know. We'll jump on with you again and we'll listen.
No, that's no, I won't play it. I'd rather get these photos together and send them to you.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you again.
Yes, well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And again, let me know when it's all erupting. I'll get you these things this afternoon.
Sounds great. Thanks
cool.
again.
All right. Take care.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, John. Bye.